So on the other end here, I have Don Caverhill, known on the album covers of Touch as Don Gallucci. That's another story, right? But we wanted to talk a little bit about the history of Touch, and I want to set this up a little bit because what happened a little while ago is I was putting together a list of the origins of progressive rock, and Touch came up as one of those missing pieces that sort of fits within the prog rock history as proto-prog. When I posted that onto the Reddit forum of r/progressive, a lot of people were going, I never knew about them. I'm checking them out right now. This is fantastic. It's amazing. And thought, wait a second. A long time ago on the Rogues Gallery, we did a show that I brought that Touch album, was able to piece it together from various different parts, and had Jeffrey and Bruce on that show, and we went through some of the history from their perspective, but I never got yours, Don. So that's why you're here today, to be grilled by yours truly about what you remember from that time back in like 1968, 1969. So
Right. Yeah, that's back when man discovered fire. It was a while ago.
they had Flintstones and such,
Yeah,
and yeah, but it's still true. That era was, there was so much happening in that time frame. So I guess to set expectations here, do you want to walk me through that original sort of era and what was going on with you? And then, of course, I have the main question that you were asking me before this interview is, what's the fuss anyway? Who's talking about us? What is all this nonsense about? I want to actually go and dive into that a little bit, because
Oh,
that's,
please, not nonsense.
you were a bit dismissive about what is, I don't really see what the cultural impact is and all that stuff. So let's get into that. So I
Sure.
will be asking you those questions, but first walk me through the time frame and just introduce to the audience here the band Touch, and just give me the basic intro here, and then we can build on that.
I was on a show with a band called Dawn of the Good Times, which I'd formed after leaving the Kingsmen because I was a sophomore in high school and I couldn't go on the road with the Kingsmen for Louie Louie.
And nobody's ever heard that song, so please continue. And that's pop rock history.
If anybody's in Italy listening, it's Luigi
Luigi Luigi. Yeah.
or Ludwig. And so we ended up with a what you would call a teeny bop band, Down the Good Times. It was good for musically, but it was light in terms of the compositions. We were good players, but it didn't matter. And so we're on the TV show. In no time, out comes One Pill Makes You, right? And we've gone from that kind of thing to Sergeant Pepper and the Stones and so forth. And all of a sudden, I'm on this TV show that's, we had a hit record called I Could Be So Good to You, and boom, it just, everything died. And we were recording with Columbia, Epic Records, but at the recording studio in Columbia. It's late at night, and I'm sitting there with Joey, the guitar player in the Good Times, and I said, "You want creative? Okay, we'll do creative. And you want different? We'll do different." I'm talking to the universe, and so that's what I wrote at the beginning of '75, and that sort of established the direction right from those opening lights in '75. And from there, over time, we built a series of compositions around it. And then it was all brand new. It wasn't, I hear sometimes that people say, oh, that the music reminds you of this, reminds you of that. But for us, it was like, let's get on the jet stream. I don't know any other way to say it. Let's just go, let's go. And so we started working on, and I started writing songs of the same, not genre, but they were no more 3-minute singles, so to speak. And that's literally how it started. It was just one song or one part of a composition became the DNA for the band.
So when you had that, I mean, at the time, were you looking at just creating something that would fit in the current sort of stream of things going on within the psychedelic art rock, something in there? Did you
So
think
there
this was going to
wasn't any,
fit, or
I
was there?
didn't know that there was any art rock. I didn't know we were progressive until I read it several years later or a long time later. And I think it was Wikipedia or something or Facebook even. It said the first progressive rock band. In those days, I had no idea what we were, no genre. There's rock from the 60s, there's a 70s retro rock group, 80s, there's early punk, early, you name it, early crossover country, and the genres are endless now. But then it was, if you think about it, back then they'd have Jimi Hendrix and Grace Slick, and then the Monkees all on the radio at the same time. Right? That's so schizophrenic. It's so broad and freewheeling that there was no let's okay, this is hot, let's go here with this type of approach. It was freeform. That was what it was like.
I see that's a clear thing. And I was actually doing some research just for my own on looking at the state of music and how people listen and the death of the album and such separate pieces that I'm just writing for fun. And in that, I actually am looking at the different genres that are in the charts. And you go in the early 60s all the way through the 70s, and then right around 1995, the genres start compressing, and now there's only two or three, where they used to be even like jazz, all kinds of weird things and psychedelic and stuff that was qualified as other because I couldn't put it anywhere. Now it's like these three. It's like R&B, rap, and maybe some pop, but rock is not even in there anymore in the current days. I'm like, oh my god, my head,
Where
it
did it
hurts
all
us.
go?
Where did it all go? But let's go back to the 65, which is much more interesting. 65 to 70 time frame, because that's the genesis here. Inside one of the Kansas album covers, Kerry Livgren himself has that famous quote about pulling over on the highway at 2 a.m. when he first heard 75. Now, did you know about Kansas's connection to touch before the album was even reissued? Because I know it's mentioned there.
That's when I learned about it. I never knew it until then. I think, you see, I found out years later, little by little, that it had a fan base that was, I don't want to say loyal, but enduring, and that people were inspired, or let's say encouraged, by the openness of their direction. And that was all new to me. I was clueless at the time. I thought it was a failure.
And so it wasn't until
Commercially.
decades later. You can still have a commercial failure that is highly influential. These things are not, they're not completely separate. There
I
is an
just didn't know
overlap.
anybody heard it. That was the thing. It'd be one thing, they all gave it a good listen, thumbs down. I never knew that it was heard. So
Before this conversation, when we were setting up this chat between us, you did mention to me that if anyone actually cited touch as an influence, who did, right? Have you found out other things since? And if so, what's the most surprising one aside from the Kerry Livgren connection?
what was surprising to me is someone had something on YouTube where you could get download touch tracks, and there were comments that went with the YouTube videos. And so when I realized it was even there, and I started seeing the comments, people talked about that it changed their life, or it was what they listened to when they graduated from high school or college, or that they keep going back to it, or they tried to, over the years, turn people onto it. And you could have blown me over with that. I had no idea.
There's more, right? I've seen references, and I'm trying to track down the actual quotes, but because some of it's lost to the mists of time and other ones are contained within the liner album notes. But I've seen references that yes, Genesis, Uriah Heep, and even Pink Floyd were influenced in a way by touch. But finding these
It
quotes is
sounds like a
difficult.
rumor to me.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
sounds like a PR guy did it. But is that true? I don't.
right. Well, you have John Anderson mentioned in your CD liner notes to go that direction. Do you know the backstory there? Does anyone from those bands ever reach out to you directly, or was it always like a external mention?
I didn't even know the mention. I'm not kidding. I didn't. The only thing I ever knew about was the Kansas one. And I like the idea that it's when he was driving through the the country, the Midwest at night or something. And then when he heard it, he couldn't drive. He had to stop and pull over. And I understand that. You try driving to 75. It's not road music. And that's what I realized. He was telling the truth. Son of a gun, I got to pull over and listen. And that was a nice quote. But all I wanted, this sounds so nice, but I'm just glad that it left something behind that wasn't a piece of crap, that actually had that endured to some extent.
Yeah, there's a wiki page that talks about touch. Somebody set it up. It's not super detailed, and I think there's more that could be added. But for instance, there was this thing about Jimi Hendrix, who not only attended your sessions, but apparently put some dollars in to help bankroll it. What was that like, and how did that come about?
That actually is not quite true, that he bankrolled the band or anything like that.
The session.
What happened was, all at the same time, we were playing around LA, and the word was that that several record companies wanted to sign us. And so we had done the album, we were recording, but there was already this buzz at the time, because that's the way it was then. It was anything new, people started talking, even if it was a rumor. We're recording at Sunset Sound. I guess you know Sunset, it's a well-known studio then. I think it still is. If you go online, you can get the dynamic qualities of the studio and the sound of the tube board, even that they've reproduced. It's that kind of a iconic place. Anyway, we're recording, and our producer, if you will, is the engineer. So I look up one day, and there's Jimi Hendrix in the booth. He just came in because he heard the buzz. And the funny part was that he paid the studio for studio time so he could listen to all the tracks in the booth. That was the money. He paid so he could hear everything all over again, uninterrupted, so to speak. But it wasn't even finished. Whatever we'd recorded, then who shows but Mick Jagger, right? Jagger was carrying the 8-track of Beggar's Banquet. He came to LA to mix it, or to see if he could, I don't know why he came all the way, but he came to LA, and he liked what he heard so much from our engineer that then our session was stopped and mixed Beggar's Banquet there at Sunset Sound. If you look on the back of the Beggar's Banquet album, you see it says Sunset Sound, Gene Shively, engineer. And that was, obviously, we weren't paying, because the guy backing us was the owner of the studio. We stopped for a week, and that's where Beggar's Banquet mixed, was in between our tracks, so to speak.
That's hilarious. Wow. Grace Slick was in that same studio too at some point.
Yeah,
You
well,
remember that?
it all happened around the same time. There was this, like I said, at that moment, it was a lovely, free world. It was not free money-wise, but anything new was at least worth checking out. And we had a good buzz. Yeah, Grace came as well. And it was all within 2 weeks or 3 weeks of each other that they all showed. Mick walks in between a take and goes, "Play me something," right? We play something on the piano. It was all cool. Why? We were all one, so to speak. And from there, I think I said it in the liner notes, piano got released, and that was it.
Failure has very many different reasons. There's albums that failed that nobody ever remembers, and then there's others that failed that have some sort of a special thing to it. There's this aura of mystery that is created by something. But part of it's, I don't know, you said the album was a failure both commercially and artistically. But when did that perception ever shift for you, or have you been in that mindset ever since, regardless of 2020 hindsight?
I never thought it failed artistically. At least I liked it. I was not at all down on it. Okay. And I think it says somewhere, but the night I wrote 75, the reason that it being 75 was this doesn't sound like anything people do today. It sounds like something in another time. That's what we said to each other. That's why we call it, and that's what it turned out to be, because it later on, what we heard was great, good stuff, terrific. It's only about 10 years ahead of its time.
Only.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I don't ever thought the album was a failure artistically. It simply is, and if you're out to be commercial and want to do it right, say that, well, you think about the Eagles or something, they're creative, they're really good, and they hit the mood. With the rule is never be more than 2 or 3 months ahead, right? If you're gonna ride the wave. And no, I'm very happy with it artistically. The only thing I wish is that we could have mixed it with today's capabilities.
Do you still have the separate tracks? That could be.
Yeah, but it's basically everything mixed down, combined to an 8-track where you've got all the vocals, different drum pieces, and so forth. And we had no synthesizers in those days. We had no any of the gadgets. The foot pedal for the guitar was like something brand new. Everything was improvised to try to get those sounds. We even got a pump organ, and I'm pumping it playing to get certain tones because there was nothing around that would do that otherwise.
So did you say that you only have the mix down? You don't have the individual tracks anymore? Because these days a
We
lot of
do,
this
but
stuff is being
I'm
remixed.
sorry, we do, but they have to be dealt with where, see, they've got stuff now that can like you can take a mono record and pull out the instruments. There's stuff now that we can even separate the combinations on the 8-track, where there's 2 or 3 things together on one track.
Right.
Yeah, I I was thinking about it. I just didn't have to do it, but that's what I would have wished, is for today's fidelity.
These days I'm more in this current world, so to speak. But these days, a lot of those albums from that era are being resampled and put into a digital workstation and remixed, and also, and the sound quality is being enhanced so that it does sound more modern. It is extremely possible, and there's a lot of people that are really good at it these days. So hopefully that door is not closed.
I'm asking you, would there, and for what, is there enough reason to do it?
That's the question, right? So the first thing is you have to see what the amount of people that are willing to pre-order it. So you could always go through some sort of a Kickstarter process to see if there's actual people willing to pay for it. And then you have to figure out how much is it going to cost, and can you break even? And are people willing to step up and be patrons of the arts, for instance, in order to help make this happen? But we need to know what that amount is first, and whether or not there's a label that's willing to run with this product, or whether we need to go separate from that. What was the label that re-released in 2012 or something? You guys did a re-release.
That was Mike Kelly at the Renaissance Theater.
No.
That was a long time ago. I think he did it because it was I don't know, 30th anniversary, 20th, 40th.
Yeah, I think it was 40, but the thing is that particular recording is extremely hard to get. It's off the shelf, you can't find it, and if you do, it costs extra when you have to find it on eBay. So maybe there is a market. We can boot this offline and look into the sort of the finances later. I'm happy to be a sounding board for that. But let's go back to the band itself, because a common narrative, again, finding stuff on Wikipedia that may be wrong, we're going to correct with this interview, is that you guys refused to tour because the music couldn't be recreated live. You talked a little bit with your organs and such. Is that accurate, or is there more to that story about not touring live?
As much as I believed in what we were doing, I knew there was no way we could recreate it live to get the sounds and make them work live. Required being through a sound system with a mixer and all kinds of background things to throw in, and they didn't do that then. Just wasn't possible. I just said, we had to go on the road and try to promote this, to play at little places, which I love. I like small rooms, and then try to get this to work. There's just too many studio effects at the time on the album. Now it's a piece of cake. You
Yeah,
can get
MIDI.
that at a 5 and dime store.
Yeah, just trigger some events. It's definitely
Yeah.
true. So earlier you mentioned that you discovered that there was what could be described as a cult following on YouTube. And it's true. I looked there and I looked for the band Touch individually, but also Touch with combined with 75. And there's thousands of
Yes.
conversations happening. Did you see anything there that surprised you or some comments that stuck out for you, or was it just all overwhelming?
That it, if it didn't have to be musicians, it was, I mean, it's one thing people hear people say, "Oh God, when I was growing up, or when I was 18 or 15 or 20, and I just loved that song. And I didn't like school, but when I put this on, it made me happy." You hear those kind of things. But what I read that was surprising to me is that there was something, I don't want to say, if not inspirational, it was like encouraging
Mhm.
that to reach out, to spread your wings and to let go. And I don't mean hippie, oh, just let go, look at flowers. I don't mean that. There was some spirit that they picked up from it that was like, spread your wings, like, go for it, whatever that is.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm not saying it right.
No, I hear you. And I think you're right. There is that sort of we're free vibe to it that people pick up on. And I think that's valuable, right? It's something that even now, so many years later, we're pushing 60, right? Years later, and there's still conversations happening about this. That's extraordinary.
The spirit that there was a spirit that's where you, and I don't mean this, I sound like a motivational seminar, or I don't go for it, or you can do it. No, it isn't. Let's get on the desk and sing the impossible dream or something. No, it's not like that. It was simply, oddly enough, I got to quote Iggy, no walls. Down on the street, no. Stooge album, Funhouse.
Hey,
Yeah,
well,
he said no walls. And that's
no walls.
no
So I want
wall.
to actually go back because now that you're mentioning the Stooges, now you played on Louie Louie at age 15 or something
Right.
along those lines, which
Puberty was a distant dream back then. It
a
was,
future thing.
yeah,
So you played on Louie Louie at 15 and then played on Touch, clearly, which is your baby, that a lot of people consider America's first prog album. And then you produced the Stooges Funhouse, which I was looking up Funhouse and seeing the historical take on it. And a lot of punk icons, as you just pointed out, they call it the greatest punk, one of the greatest records ever made, not just punk records, greatest records
right.
ever made. So you helped launch 3 genres, man. What's going on here? How does that legacy feel now? Does it feel, I know it's probably ancient history to you, but for crying out loud, you were at the genesis of 3 separate things that became directions on their own.
Like I said, my quote on the Stooge album or the Funhouse album was, I didn't screw it up. Because I had to record them. I ended up putting very little input musically into it just to get the vibe right and the sound, and for them to be comfortable doing what they're doing, because nobody was. Jack Holtzman was the president of Elektra Records back then. And of course, they had the Doors, but Jack had started as recording folk music back when it was like a new idea, folk singers. And he hated the noisiness of recordings at the time, with where you get the sound of the grooves and the pops and those kind of things. And so he was very tech oriented, and he built the first solid state transistor board on the West Coast. And he had the first Dolby and Lansing type speakers and all of that, all to get a really clean recording sound. And the studio had infinite baffles for separation and Persian rugs on the floor and everything for mood. But the thing is, I'm a staff producer at Elektra, and they sent me to New York to hear this band they signed in Greenwich Village called In the Stooges. That it was not even Iggy Pop, it was just Iggy and the Stooges. And I go to Greenwich Village. I know nothing. I'm a hick from Portland still. That's where the end of the Oregon Trail. I just like music. So I go to this club, and this guy comes out in skin tight jeans, cowboy boots, a dog collar, and silver lame evening length gloves. And he jumps on the table, grabs one of those candles that have fishnet, and then he pours the wax down himself on his chest. That's how I hadn't heard any music yet. That was the opening, right? So the next day, Jack says, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's an old saying today, but or was interesting act, but you can't get it on tape, so to speak." And he said, "Do it anyway." So I'm in California, and I hadn't heard much of the songs, and they come out, and I realize we have exactly the wrong studio. We have this super clean, tight sounding Dolby thing, and these guys, if they didn't have a live sound, it wouldn't work. They wouldn't even want to be where they're behind a baffle and wearing headphones and that. So the short story is I ended up taking all the rugs out, taking all the baffles out, and I set them up in front of the other side of the booth window. So we're like the audience, and they're on the other side in a row. And set them in a row, and it ended up, we gave Iggy a handheld mic. So he's just moving like this. There's no windscreen or anything. That relaxed them. And so they played like they were just in a garage. And somehow that mood was enough for them to just concentrate on doing their thing, that minimalist energy that they were pushing. And Iggy got to emote. And he was free because he'd walk around. He wasn't like this. You see a singer in a studio, they're holding the headphones like this. He was like that. And you could hear the little pops and wind noise, but it worked. So that's how that sound came about. And the interesting thing is that it never was duplicated. I never knew there was such, again, that album, let's not use the word fail. How about say, didn't catch on? Okay. And when I heard that Rhino, to meet a demand, made a box set of CDs of the outtakes, I can't comprehend anybody wanting to hear the outtakes of exactly the same tracks, because it wasn't like different overdubs or different ways of doing things. It was just outtakes to get the best performance. That was it. So you get to hear the same thing over and over, except if the guy dropped the drumstick, okay, it stops.
Pick it up.
Yeah, but then not long ago, I don't know, you're probably aware of this, some people aren't, Rhino released those outtakes in another box set of vinyl. So now you have 33 third size records on vinyl of the same exact outtakes.
You could be cynical about it and say it's just a cash grab. Or you can say, look, this is for the completionists, for the true collectors, and Rhino is delivering something that they want and cherish. Now, is everyone going to listen to all those outtakes? But they have their library that they want to remonetize, and this is a really good way. And that's why I'm thinking that Touch has a chance within that sort of framework of reissues and celebrations. Your 60th anniversary is coming up pretty soon for the album. Those things they're valid within this framework, and you're not looking at it as a re-release, you're looking at it as a special commemorative anniversary limited edition type thing. So there's possibilities there.
I'm opening up a new investment vehicle, and you can, if you hurry, you can get on board.
Let's do it.
Okay,
Up to
I'll
the
make room for you, but the spots are going fast. Okay.
okay, yeah, slots are going fast. Sign up today. I get it.
Yeah.
Earlier, when you were talking about the Stooges and that live sound, and Louie Louie as well, that was also a very live sounding recording to me. It's chaotic. There's stuff happening, and
Well,
Louie
not on
Louie.
purpose.
Yeah, not on purpose, but that's
No.
still no. But listen to this crazy theory that I just made up. I'm in Seattle, right? So we had this thing called grunge. You might remember it was like between 90 and 95. Grunge music, I can almost draw a direct line from Louie Louie and the Stooges, bam, right into grunge, and not have a hard time defending it as a sort of a progenitor sound stage. That just occurred to me, and that's still a Pacific Northwest thing. Then, if you look at Louie Louie, that just came up in my head.
What
Am
do
I
you know
completely off
about that?
kilter?
Do you know about the recording of Louie Louie? We were playing at a thing called a teenage nightclub, which is an oxymoron because you only make money on alcohol. How do you have a teenage nightclub and make money, mocktails, whatever they call it? This DJ had opened his nightclub, teenage nightclub called Chase, whose name was Ken Chase, and we were the house band because the Kingsmen were the most popular band, high school band out of the 9 high schools in Portland. We're playing, and a couple weeks go by, and he comes up, the owner, and says, "Guys, I'm losing my shirt. We got to get a bigger draw." And he says, "If I could say the Kingsmen recording artist when I'm advertising the club, we'll get more kids." And we're going, "How do you get it on the radio?" He says, "I'm a DJ. I spin music." In those days, DJs controlled their own top 20 and their own playlist. And he said, "If I say that this is getting in all the requests and burning up the charts, then I'm
It's
saying."
true.
So who's got, so he says, so we said, "We got to record a record." He said, "Okay." And so he picks for us to record what was starting to be a hit in Seattle, which was the Wailers. If you know the Wailers, it's from Seattle, not the other Wailers. And they had released Louie Louie, and it was a big hit in Seattle. And it was brilliant because if you ever heard the original Louie by Richard Berry, the song was like a doo-wop vocal kind of thing. And it was what you used to call a calypso. "He gotta go," like that. And it had no funk to it that you would say now, but it was of the period. So when the Wailers, what they did was just genius. Rockin' Robert Roberts and the singer and Rich Dangle, the guitar player. So their version or their arrangement was a big hit. And Ken says, "Let's record this." So we go to the studio with 3 hours, and when Ken would do a run through, and by the way, it's a jingle studio in Portland, and that's where they record dry cleaner ads and used cars and that kind, or plumbers and stuff. That's what they were used to. And I think 2-track was big then. And we start to play, and I see this look of horror on Ken's face through the booth when he hears Jack singing the lead. He was like, "No way." And so he's telling Jack, "You're crowding the mic. Step back." "Okay, how's this?" "More." Till finally, he's in another zip code, practically. And so he says, "Okay, let's try that." And Jack, though, kept rushing the mic in the recording when we were actually doing it. I don't know why, because he was wearing braces and he got too close and he shocked himself with the microphone. So finally, there's $50 in 3 hours, and that's it. So we raised the mic on a boom, like up to the ceiling. And that way Jack couldn't get any closer. You're hearing as a guy try singing and getting a tone like this, right? And so it's all squeezed. That's why it sounds like he's singing through a straw practically. And he's like this. But of course, we've inadvertently broken the rule of recording. We have a room mic. right? This white up here, and the guy's singing like this. And Lynn Easton, the drummer, leader of the group, was some, how do I say it? He had a lot of confidence. And another story, but I ended up changing the arrangement on the spot because I never recorded before. But when I first heard it, it sounded like mush. The guitar players weren't playing down low like they were supposed to, like that. And it was just strumming. And I said, this sounds like a Punch Magic Dragon. You know, it's wimpy. So I changed the piano part on the spot. I raised it up an octave and made it strong because they weren't playing it. What are you supposed to be on piano like that? So Lynn hears this sort of stronger line. And so he just starts playing louder and he starts playing fills. And that's why you hear all the way, like you said, the live sound is because he's just blowing and going. And that's how it happened.
Oh man, amazing. Thanks for taking me there. I was there in that little studio with you when you were narrating this. This is just great.
Oh yeah, you know, here's the thing. Can I make this up? This is not possible. No one would be. The thing is, in my school, they had heard the Wailers, that Louie Louie. And so when they heard ours, because Ken was playing it on his radio show, they would laugh at me. I walked down the hall and they go, they thought it was junk. At the time, I wasn't proud of it. It took me years to understand that there was some, I guess I'm sounding like Touch here, some free-for-all spirit that everybody just, what it reminded me of in retrospect is the way you feel when you're trying to keep your balance slipping on ice. It's everybody just leaping and trying not to fall down. And I guess it has that spirit because in different cultures, people name their clubs and restaurants and bars and stuff in Istanbul and Tokyo, a Louie Louie bar or something, and because somehow everyone knows what that must feel like in me.
Mm-hmm.
That you could have knocked me over 100 times when I realized the effect of it. But I'm here to say, think about it. They make Louis marathons where they play it over and over for a weekend. And on radio stations, there are many examples or incidents of this. But the thing is, I think Eleanor Rigby is a great piece of music with the quartet and the lyrics and everything. Could you listen to Eleanor Rigby 72 hours straight?
Probably not.
We get back from our tour, and there's the FBI or the mayor of Indiana, governor of Indiana saying, I've determined that this record is pornographic. We're supposed to do this. Can you hear this?
Yeah, I hear something.
That's the range. It's supposed When I heard it, it was so much Puff the Magic Dragon. And it wasn't a rehearsal thing. I just went out and went. That was worked out in the studio, and the guys didn't even know it. So on the next take, instead of hearing, they heard this.
Yeah, the higher.
They edit cut, and that's what kept sewed it together, so to speak. And they played to that, and now Lynn is playing these or some. That was all stream. It's not. I don't think it's proper to use with Louie Louie stream of consciousness. Okay, that's a little much.
But it's all there though. But we're out of time, unfortunately, here.
Sorry, I told you I was paid by the word. I told
you. Yeah, absolutely. But it's beautiful. We went all across genres, talked about Touch, talked about Stooges, talked about Louie Louie, everything, the recording mishaps, all that fun stuff. There's a lot to dig into here. And I suspect that you and I are going to have some other conversations beyond this with some of this other stuff that we were discussing. But for now, I think this is just a great point to thank you for your generous time and for your insights. And thanks for giving us that inside tour.
You're most welcome, and I appreciate the opportunity. And just make sure to get your check in so you can get in on that new investment of ours. Okay.
Checks in the mail. Thank
Thank
you,
you
Don.
very much. I appreciate the time and the chance to, if anybody's interested in adding a little more color to things.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.